all starch. Yeah. Just the whole thing out. Why would she?
Here she is. Came to crash the potty.
And rest of the chance that you might have to take it. Which, I don't know, that's my logic. No. But no, so when they did this and they did see it.
You don't have any friends.
And they see it, they also call it like a system. So,
That's fine.
so we know she's going to have to have a history. We know she's going to be right before Thanksgiving. But we don't know what the emergency. Yeah. Oh, we're good. But otherwise, like,
I'm going to sneak out and watch them before 10:30.
Can I just get started, or do you want me to wait?
Oh, there's Megan. Well, there you go. There she is. Okay, ladies. Bring it all back. I'm really, really thrilled to have this presentation to you guys, especially because we just got done, we just got concluded a two-part self-leadership workshop. We've been having some great discussions on how their leadership is going to build and sustain cultures and organizations and ultimately produce high-performing, highly committed employees, which is why I thought it would be extremely valuable to hear from somebody. Remember that rule of 1/8 we just talked about, and I said Bartolotta of Restaurants are part of that rule of 1/8, insofar as building winning organizations, using great leadership to build and sustain terrific cultures that are just really are high impact organizations, and it speaks to where they began and where they are now and their growth. So I know you had a chance. I had them. I'm not going to go through your long bio. I actually did it to them.
Yeah,
So they read your bio and a
knew
little bit of
that.
the history of Bartolotta
That's
Restaurants.
boring.
So, Mr. Joe Bartolotta.
Hey, everybody. How come there's no men in this class? I don't get that. So who wants to be an entrepreneur and own your own business someday? How many people? Okay. Some did. Who didn't raise their hand? Okay. So give me why don't you want to own your own business? You, I'm looking at you right now.
I know you are. I don't because my major is CIT and I want to do programming for a business. I don't want to own my own.
Okay. How about you? You don't want to own your own business?
Honestly don't think I'm capable of running a business.
You're capable of anything. Just keep that in mind. Okay? You're capable of almost anything. Who else doesn't want to own a business? Yep.
The financial aspect of it.
The risk profile.
Yeah, too much of a risk.
Yeah, there is risk, no question. A very wise guy told me one time, who was an entrepreneur, he said, Joey, his name was George Dalton, brilliant guy, owned a lot of cool stuff. He said, Joey, entrepreneurs never take a risk. And I looked at him and I said, George, you're crazy. Of course they take a risk. He said, no, they don't, Joe. Because in the brain of an entrepreneur, their vision, their concept, their ability to succeed is so powerful that the thought of failing never enters their mind. So a true entrepreneur never takes a risk because they believe in themselves so much that taking a risk is really not in the cards for them. Now, if you present a crazy idea to a bank and the bank sees a lot of risk, you're probably not going to get the loan. And there are many entrepreneurs who fail because they have that dream. So it isn't all about just doing things. It's about vetting out the process and making sure your ideas are proven. And there's actually a market for what you want to do. I have an interesting story in that I never really went to school or college. I went to high school. I graduated high school. Went to Tosa East, and I was a 3.2, 3.3 student. Pretty pathetic. I I am a very much a shiny spoon kind of guy. I'm probably undiagnosed ADHD, whatever they call those things. Hard time to focus on anything. I'm a very creative mind. I bounce all over the room. And there's huge value in having a brain like that. I have the ability to not dwell on things too long. I have the ability to deal with a crisis and then move on very quickly. I sleep really well at night, which is awesome. But I also realize that there's a side of my brain that I don't have. And by not having that side of the brain, I've had to compensate by hiring people to work with me who have that side of my brain. See, in building a company, it's all about the chemistry of your business and the chemistry of your company. Finding the strengths and the weaknesses with the individuals you have, within your organization. The one thing that is non-negotiable in that type of relationship is there may be boring bean counters, but they have to have the passion in their own way, to want to make the organization succeed. You have to be an army marching at the same time in the same direction, headed towards the same goals to be successful. And when you have that, you're really, really powerful. You're really successful. Building a team is probably one of my biggest satisfactions, one of the things I've enjoyed the most. What I have been able to do through my very eclectic, strange personality is to get a bunch of people to follow me. So imagine you're on this lake up north, and the lake is so smooth it's like a sheet of glass. And I'm in a speedboat going like 40 miles an hour, cutting through this beautiful piece of water. And behind me, I'm leaving this enormous wake of destruction. Okay? I hire people who help make that wake of destruction work. I create the wake, and then I have people in our organization who help make it all work. So I have the vision. I want to go like this. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm not right. But they make this whole thing work back here. It's easy opening a restaurant, it's easy creating a business. The hard work starts the minute you open the door for business. Because that's when it really starts. That's when you have to manage a business. And you have to manage it with a lot of different components. So I started my career, I bounced around, I graduated high school. I knew I never wanted to go to college. I would have failed miserably. I can't focus. I don't think, honestly, this is embarrassing, I don't think I've really ever read a book in my entire life. Not proud of that, but it's a fact of who I am. I read a lot of articles. I can stay focused for about a page or two, One of the greatest publications I get sent to my home every week is something called The Week. You should write that down because it is something that is worth getting delivered to you. It's about a 16 or 18 page little magazine, and all the articles are about that big. And it recaps everything that happened in the world in these really small little pieces. And I can deal with that. That's my little speech. It talks about what happened on this side, what happened on this side, what the editors think, what the columnists think. It talks about all kinds of arts and entertainment and movies and all kinds. Anyway, that's my pitch. It's a great magazine. But that's how I compensate, by finding ways where I don't have to sit and read, long books. I get little pieces of information. Because that's the way my brain is. The one thing I learned, actually, after I graduated high school, that I really didn't have any direction. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I never went to any dances, proms, homecoming, never had a girlfriend, never dated anybody. Hard to imagine, right? But, I was really sort of a recluse. And my dad one day suggested I start bartending. Because bartending, at the very least, you have to talk to people. I have to ask them if they want a drink. Started a dialogue, and I realized that I had ability to really connect with people, and they viewed me as being sincere and honest, and in some ways humble, And I was able to really rally people together. So my brother had moved to Europe. He'd worked in a bunch of different restaurants. He was headed to the restaurant business. My sister was in New York. She was in the restaurant business. So I moved out to New York, and my goal was to I knew I wanted to be an owner of a business. I didn't know what kind, but I just assumed it was going to be a restaurant. So I moved to New York, and I tell people I made most of my mistakes with other people's money. Now this is important. Listen, if you listen to this, what does that say? There are colleges and universities and schools that I can go and learn the restaurant business. But to me, the best way to learn the restaurant business is to roll up your sleeves and get in there and do it. So I worked for about 6 or 8 different restaurants in New York, and I learned my craft. I made my mistakes with other people's money. Before I'm willing to risk my own, I knew a lot about the industry. I was ready to own my own business. People who all of a sudden decide, I'm going to own a restaurant. Let's go open a restaurant with 0 experience. Those restaurants are the ones most likely to fail. So I've already made a lot of the mistakes, and now I have that wealth of knowledge going into my own business, which makes it, the opportunity for success a little bit greater. There is no given in any business. I could tell you that all the hard work will make you successful. That's not always the case. So, I scratch my head how some businesses, as crazy as they sound, are wildly successful, and other businesses have a solid product or a solid service and they fail. It's sort of a weird little thing. I know that if we focus on our business each and every day, and we have that team rallied behind us, and you create a culture within your organization that is nurturing and fulfilling to the employees, you'll have less turnover. You'll have an opportunity to grow a brand, and that's really important. And you will have a better opportunity for succeeding. Our first restaurant was a small little place in Wauwatosa. It was 53 seats, Bartolotta of Bartolotta. Anybody been there? Not yet. Maybe. So that was our first restaurant almost 25 years ago. And after about a year, I had realized one day that, can I say bad? I can't say bad language, right? I have to watch my language, right? Because the restaurant business is like a factory. So we say words like shit all the time. So I'm probably not supposed to say shit here, so I won't. But I realized that what I had just created was a job for myself, and that's the worst thing to do. It was a small little restaurant. We had no scalability, meaning we weren't big enough. So I built this small little cozy little restaurant, and guess who did the payroll? Guess who did the schedules? Guess who did the ordering? Guess who who worked the floor? Guess who answered the phone? Guess who cleaned up at night? Guess who shoveled the sidewalk? I created a job for myself. And I was happy, but I wasn't making enough money to afford somebody to help me run the business. So I was doing it all by myself. That is how a lot of businesses fail. The owners just burn out. They just get exhausted. Paying the bills, doing the payables, getting the receivables figured out. You may be open for 10 hours in a retail environment, but there's another 4 or 5 hours of paperwork at the end of the day. So they just fry themselves out. So I realized I had just built myself a job. I couldn't take a vacation because there's nobody to cover me. So after about a year and a half, I was starting to get miserable. At that point, I realized I need to build a company. And so started looking around for opportunities, and then we opened Lake Park Bistro. So anybody been to Lake Park Bistro? Anyway, so Lake Park, beautiful space. It was an abandoned building by the county. It took me about 18 months to get it all figured out and approved and built. But we opened it. Now, here's a complete opposite of what I had in Wauwatosa. Wauwatosa was 53 seats. I could run it with less than 30 employees. Lake Park was 180 seats, and I had like 70 employees. Totally different scenario. But all of a sudden, I had revenue and income that I could support some infrastructure, and that's how I started to build the business. I was able to hire a general manager. I was able to hire an assistant manager at Restaurante, because now I had a little bit more money company-wide, and so I was able to bounce between the two units, and it was really, really fulfilling. The next restaurant was Mr. B's after that, and so currently now we have 20 different businesses with about 1,100 employees. So that sort of sucks too. There's, be careful what you wish for. It's great being the big footprint that we have in the city. But as you grow, and there's this game called Jenga. You guys know what Jenga is, right? So you pull a block out of the bottom, and you put it on top. That's good news, right? Pull a block out, put it on top. Pull a block out, put it on top. Well, guess what happens? This thing starts to get really high, right? But eventually, what happens? It tips over. That's a great business analogy. So in order to prevent that from tipping over, what's the logical thing to do? Build out this way too. So as you're building up, you need to build out. To me, I call this infrastructure. You need to have a strong foundation, a strong base to support your growth. If you grow too fast and don't build up your infrastructure and your foundation, you tip over. I was probably more paranoid than most, because I wanted to keep growing as a company, but I didn't want to have cracks in the walls. So I made sure I had plenty of infrastructure. I probably overbuilt my infrastructure to protect us from ever tipping over. A lot of pitfalls in business you have to be aware of, but I needed great accounting, I need great numbers, I need data, however you say it, to be able to make good decisions in our business. So technology has allowed that to happen. I got the coolest thing on my phone right now. It's called the Pulse. So I can't show it to you right now, but I can type in here, and I can look in real time the sales of every one of my restaurants on my phone. And once I'm in that restaurant, I can drill down to find how much labor I have running right now. I can drill down, I can look at a guest check. I can look at a customer's check from last night or a month ago on my phone. That's cool technology. To be able to do that, it's scary cool. But I can look at my phone at the end of the night and know what our sales are for the whole company, just like that. So knowledge is really, really important. I don't embrace technology. I actually quite hate it. I think it has pulled us apart as a race, as a group of human beings. I think technology has really separated the really important dynamic of working with people. And on the same token, it's brought a whole new level of information and speed. I worry when I walk through my restaurants and I see a young couple out on a date and they're both doing this and they're not talking to each other. It drives me crazy. So why are you here? It's just, these things are horrible. They're horrible. But we've become so dependent on them. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. I'm like, you can see why I can't do. You see why I didn't do college? Yes.
That was an app, the Pulse?
Yeah. It's tied in through our POS system, point of sale system. So all the employees punch in on it. Everything's run through our POS system. Goes up into the cloud, and then it's brought back down to earth pretty much at my corporate offices, where they then put everything in individual bucket, and then I can. It's pretty cool. I know how many cash sales I had, how many sales went on MasterCard. I know how much money I spent in dishwashers, how much money I spent on cooks. All really good pieces of information. So I was prepped a little bit when I came here to talk about, building a team and building a group of an organization. I think that's super important. You missed the best part of the whole speech, by the way. I got nothing. Anyway, any questions? No, I'm kidding.
One of the things that we were talking about before your arrival was the importance of investing in employees, particularly as it pertains to job satisfaction, motivating employees, managing stress, those types of things. What are some of the things that you do for your employees? Because I know you invest in your employees and
Right.
Focusing on their satisfaction. So if you could share with the ladies some of the strategies that you employ toward that end.
Well, our business is really tough. The restaurant business is probably the hardest business out there. I can't think of any business harder than the restaurant business. People have this romantic idea of what it's all about, but it's really hard, and it's getting harder by the minute. The reason is it's sort of what I call margin compression from a business standpoint. Line up 100 pennies on a desk, okay, that's $1. So now take about 48 of those pennies away, and that represents your labor and your benefits for your employees. So that leaves you about 52 pennies, right? Now, your cost of goods, that's what I spend for lettuce, milk, and cheese, and meat and fish and all. That's my cost of goods. My beer, my vodkas, everything. Cost of my raw materials that I have to bring into my business to sell. That runs about 30 to 32%. So we're left with, my prime cost is at almost 50, and my other 50, 60, 70, about 80% I'm at right now for my prime cost. There was a time my prime cost, and that's labor, benefits, and cost of goods, used to hover around 45%, then it inched up to 50%. Now we're almost close to 70 or 80% cost of prime cost. Now on top of the prime cost, I have to pay rent, I have to pay insurances, I have to buy linen, I have to buy china, glass, and silverware. At the end of the day, I'm left with about 6 or 7 pennies, on $1. So if I do $1 million in sales, I may end up with about $70,000 in profit. To do $1 million in sales is a lot of work. So the individual costs of running a restaurant have gotten really difficult. And it's funny. Pretend I have a plate, a dinner plate. And I take that dinner plate and I drop it on the floor accidentally, and it breaks. How much do you think that plate costs? Throw a number out. What do you think a plate costs? $15. Great. So I just broke a $15 plate. Was that plate actually $15 to me? I would say yes. Now I have to go replace that plate. So I go to the store and I buy a $15 plate and put it back in inventory. The problem with that is that plate actually is worth $150. It's a $150 plate, not $15 plate. And why is that? So remember I did the pennies thing? And for easy math, let's just say I make 10% margin. So I got 10 pennies on the desk. I have to do $150 in sales through my customers and make 10% profit on that $150 in sales. To now have the $15 in my hand to go replace that one plate. Everybody follow that? Pretty scary stuff. So when a plate drops, I don't think it's a $15 plate. It's a $150 plate, which literally wipes out a 4-top in one of my restaurants. So a 4-top may spend $150. I break one plate. All the profit from that table is gone because of that one plate. Now imagine a dishwasher carrying a tray, or an SA carrying a tray and dropping 50 plates, and they all break. It happens, or breaks 10 glasses. You know, the bartenders are polishing cheap snap. They just throw it in the garbage. They don't think about it. You know, it's an $8 glass. It's an $80 glass to me. You know, the economics are tough in our business. So when you're in business, there has to be more than just chasing dollars. There has to be a joy. There has to be a pleasure about doing that. And to me, the best pleasure that we have is actually working with our employees and creating a team, as I said. I think the key to our organization is our hiring process, our vetting process, and our training process. We give our employees a voice in our business, because who knows more about your business than your employees? They're in the trenches every day. They know exactly what's happening in your business. If you don't ask them, if you don't involve them in the decisions, you're wasting a very valuable resource. We give employees a voice in our business. We want them to participate. We want them to be part of our company. I believe the strength of our company also lies in the lack of turnover. We don't have a lot of turnover in our company. Now, our business inherently is loaded with transient employees who work 2, 3, 4 years, primarily while they're putting themselves through college. Anybody work in the restaurant business now? No? Good. You guys are lucky. A lot of college kids have to put themselves through college by working a part-time job in a restaurant. It's not a bad gig, you know. Per hour, you can make $25 or $30 an hour, depending on the kind of restaurant that you're working at, you know, and tips. So we have a lot of college students working at our company, but you know, we have them for 3, 4 years, and then what happens? And I actually tell them about this. I said, don't get trapped, because a lot of times, you know, you can come in at 4 o'clock and leave at 8:30 or 9 o'clock with $200 in your pocket. It's not a bad day, you know, in tips. So it becomes very addictive to get hooked on the restaurant business. So I've got people who graduated college, can't find a job in the field, and they're still working in the restaurant business. You know, am I taking too long?
No, I just have another meeting. Good to see you.
Yep, thank you. So I don't know if I answered your question well. Where'd you go?
I'm right here.
Oh,
Sorry.
I don't know if I answered your, so you want to know how we keep people engaged and.
Yeah, because that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned retention, because that's a discussion that we've had also as far as creating an organization that promotes highly committed employees, and we talked about the high cost of turnover.
You ever
and
wonder?
message to them that
Yeah, you ever wonder in a business how there's some really crummy businesses out there, and I've wondered this sometimes. How employees can work for a company that just is morally corrupt, you know? To me, I could now work for a business that was not taking care of me, much less taking care of the customer. And yet there's a lot of businesses out there that are still in business, and I don't know why. Insurance companies are the greatest example. You know, there has to be somebody on the other end of that line that is trained to say no and is completely unwilling to help you. So who works for that kind of company? You know, I have a hard time. So in our company, no doesn't exist in our vocabulary. We are there to serve. It's hospitality. It's taking care of each other, and it's taking care of our guests. We have 5 tenets of operation. Number 1 is taking care of the employee. Number 2 is taking care of the guest. Number 3 is taking care of our vendors. Number 4 is taking care of the community. We're very active in the community. And number 5 is making profit. So if you notice, making money is my last tenet of operation. My CFO would hate that. He does hate that because he wants me to make more money. But I always believe if you do the first 4 really well, then making money becomes sort of easy. It's never easy, but it becomes easy to earn. So, you know, this sounds a little crazy, but I would like people to think the way I think. And part of my job is to instill our philosophy or my philosophy. So I want them to ask a really quick question: what would Joe do? You know, it sounds very egotistical, but you know, what would Joe do? Because if you can think the way Joe does, then making some of those decisions make a lot of sense. You know, we've got great stories over the years of things that we've done with our customer. We've made a series of radio commercials about them, creating, memory. Every guest will leave you a little nugget of information. If you can turn that nugget into an emotional connection, then you can build a brand. You can actually build a relationship with a guest where they want to come back to that restaurant over and over again. So there's been hundreds of restaurants that has opened in Milwaukee in the last 5 or 6 years. So people freak out about that, as do I, because competition is always nipping at your heels. But the only thing I can control is what happens within my 4 walls. I have absolute power. I am king within my 4 walls. I can't control what happens down the street to the next restaurant. What I can control is my experience here has to be better than that other person's experience. So by doing that, we ensure ourselves of longevity and success, because we're always focused on the details, we're always focused on the employees, we're always focused on the customer. And that's been our success story, clearly. Building a team is the most important thing you'll ever do in business. Whether you're running an IT department with 3 people underneath you for another company, that's fine. But if you're heading that department, your employees have to want to come to work every day to get the most out of them. How would you want to be treated? It's always a good question I ask. Treat your employees the way you would want to. If you would want to be treated like shit, then you're going to be a horrible boss, But if you treat your employees like you would want to be treated, you're going to have happy people, I think, Questions?
How do you sort of deal with issues of like disciplinaries and if the employee does sort of do something that is
Yeah, if people step out of bounds.
Yeah.
I think I think clear policies are important.
Okay.
Communicating up front are really important. Letting them know what the expectations are of the job. We call it coaching, and we have a progressive discipline program within our organization where everybody screws up, So we pull you aside, we talk through the situation, send you back out. If you have another mess up, now maybe it's a note to file, and now maybe it's a write-up perhaps, depending on the severity of it. If somebody's taking money from me, they're done. Trust is a really important thing to me. Don't violate the trust. But yeah, there are times I have to graduate people early. That's what we call it. This may not be the right fit for you, so we're going to graduate you.
Yeah.
You can move on to another experience. I've also fired customers. I've had really bad customers who have had to ask them never to come back. Listen, we tried so hard to make you happy. Clearly, we have failed at that, and I feel really bad about that. So please, don't give us the opportunity to ever disappoint you again. What are you saying? I'm saying don't give us the opportunity to disappoint you. I don't want you to come back. But you tell me not to come back. Yeah, we clearly have failed. I love this place. Well, why do you complain about everything? So, yes.
Out of curiosity, how did you do, because you said you built your restaurants in 1993, so how did you deal with the recession in 2008, for example, or like the economy just going up and down?
Yeah, I mean, there are ebbs and flows with the economy. 2008 was hard for everybody. A lot of the corporate, we rely on a lot of the corporate business, so a lot of the corporate business sort of disappeared in 2008, 9, and 10. So a lot of restaurants contracted and did this. A lot of restaurants went out of business. We actually expanded. We opened 2 restaurants during that time. We actually we bulked up our marketing budget, went on the air with radio commercials, billboards, everything. We created more awareness through the community during a downtime. We felt there was market share that we could grab by getting our name out in front of people. So we adjusted very aggressively, and we came through that recession, stronger, bigger, faster, everything. It was a great. It was actually a really good time for us. Right now, you know, we're dealing with the economics. I mean, you know, the restaurant business actually employs 2 out of every 10 workers in America. So, let me clarify that. Hospitality workers, service industry workers. So people work at hotels, people work, anything that has to do with service or hospitality. Restaurants, hotels, convention centers, resorts, 2 out of 10 people are employed. The restaurant industry and the hospitality industry is the 2nd largest employer in the country, next to the US government. People don't realize that. They talk about auto industries, tech industries, not even close. There are more employees in the hospitality, food service industry than any other industry. Yet we have very little voice because we're all these small little organizations. You know, there's no cohesiveness. We have lobby groups in Washington trying to fight for us. But, you know, we've got some stuff coming over the horizon. Customers will only spend so much on food. Everybody has a threshold. My pricing on my menus cannot keep up with the rising costs and everything else. It's a dead formula. As everything goes up, if my meat goes up, and this happens, example, filet, I buy these beautiful fillets. So, piece of meat filet might cost me right now $13. In about 3 or 4 weeks, that $13 piece of meat will go to $21 because it's the holidays and everybody wants to buy filet. The market supposedly gets short. I think it's a bunch of crap. I think they're just seeing price increases. But that filet goes from $13 to $21 a pound. That affects my business. Now, I can't just go to my menu and raise my menu price up consistent with that price because my menu price becomes too expensive. And I run the risk of losing a customer because we're too expensive. We're already considered expensive in the marketplace. So I have to eat that increase. Now, it typically then comes down, and it comes down probably in the first 3 months of the year. It'll be back to $13. But I have to absorb that added cost. And it's a challenging thing to do. And so that's one example of why it's really hard to be in this business right now. I love it. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to be successful no matter what. But it's creating an opportunity for us to look at different things to do. Menu engineering. The menu really controls everything in our business. It controls our labor. It controls our food costs. It controls pretty much everything. So we have to evaluate. Maybe I have to take filet off the menu for a couple of months because it's too expensive, and put in a different cut of meat that people still love, but I can stay in my price point. You know, so those are all things that we constantly are monitoring and looking at all the time. You have to be nimble. You have to be able to adjust. Questions?
Are you planning to expand more than the restaurants?
Our company is we're at a critical point in our evolution. So there's an old adage, we are too big of a company to be small anymore, and we're too small of a company to be big anymore. You know, we're not big enough. So there's this area that is really inefficient. It's a hard area to play in because I built all this infrastructure, but I may not have all the sales to support the infrastructure. So that would tell me I need to keep growing. But as I keep growing, I'm adding more employees, more infrastructure. You know, I look at our P&L statements and say, you know what? With 20 businesses and 1,100 employees, I probably would have been better off stopping at 4. I'd be wealthier and a lot less amount of headaches had I stopped at 4 restaurants. And these are decisions that we all make, but I grew the company not for Joe. This isn't about Joe's ego. This isn't about Joe wanting to be the king of the hill. I grew the company because as part of our plan and part of our strategy is to minimize turnover. And I've got great managers who work for me. They need to see a path. They need to see, you know, an area for them to keep growing in your business. And, you know, most business sectors will say, if you're not growing, you're dying. So to stop at 4 restaurants, most of my key managers would have been gone by now because they want more than 4 restaurants we give them. And I felt really important to keep these people engaged and give them a quality of life. You know, eventually someday I'd like to be able to sell the company to employees and let them own it, you know, and create opportunities for them because they've helped me build this thing. Other questions? Yeah.
I noticed in the bio here that your brother did extensive training in Italy. I'm from Northern Ireland, so I'm just kind of wondering if there was kind of any observations that he made, or even yourself, in terms of how business operates. Like
My brother is a very talented guy. He's won 2 James Beard Awards, so that, for those who may or may not know, that's like the Academy Award for the culinary world. So it doesn't get any bigger than a James Beard Award. He won one in Chicago and he won one in Las Vegas. So he's a really great chef, and he's worked for really big companies. The Levy organization in Chicago was an enormous company. He worked for Steve Wynn at a Las Vegas casino, an enormous company. So my brother learned a lot about running a business from a very, very corporate setting. I've built this business pretty much grassroots, not embracing the corporate culture too much. I never want to lose ourselves. So my brother and I have this healthy dialogue. We fight all the time about how to run the business, you know. And I can't deny with his, you know, what he brings to the table is brilliant and genius, but it's counterintuitive to my soul sometimes, you know. He's like, we got to cut labor. We got to lay 3 or 4 people off this week. I'm like, I can't do that.
So would you say, like, here in the United States, we'd have more focus on that sort of corporate culture, business? Because I'm sort of interested in the differences between how business operates in the States and how it operates in Europe.
Europe is, so I travel a lot to France, and I travel a lot to Italy, and so most restaurants are small, family-run places. Yeah. And like I said, they've created a job for themselves.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because that's their livelihood. And most of those businesses, they've been in place for 50 years. They're passed down from family generation to generation. And that's how a lot of the restaurants are in Europe. They don't really have multiple locations, very few. Some do. There's some national chains in Europe, just like the US. But for the most part, you know, they're pretty much independent proprietors, maybe 1, maybe 2 locations.
Yeah,
That's
because I
about
kind
it.
of find sort of back home in the UK and Northern Ireland that the kind of independent sort of family-owned restaurants are actually going out, like going out of business
Yeah.
in favour of the bigger sort of chains.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's just like a UK thing or.
No, I think it's really hard for the independents to make money.
Yeah.
I mean, I said that earlier. There's just not a lot of margin in our business, no matter where you are. See, I'm a manufacturer. You know, people think I'm a restaurant guy. I'm a manufacturer. I manufacture a product. I take a piece of salmon in my back door. That's a whole fish, and I have to do something with it. I can't just plop it on a plate and sell it. And I've only got 2 days to get rid of it. A manufacturer can make a ball bearing, and it can sit on a shelf for months. You know, I got 2 days. So we have a supply chain situation. So I have to figure out how to order properly, how to prep it, how to cook it, how to make it be something that the guest is going to pay for, and do that within a 2-day window. Otherwise, it's spoiled and it's a garbage and it's a complete waste. So imagine trying to estimate, God, how many pieces of salmon am I going to sell on Friday? Today's Thursday. So how many pieces of salmon, how much salmon do I order for the weekend? My guys have gotten really good at it, but it's hard. Do I go 5 whole fish, 4 whole fish, 3 whole fish? So if I have 3 whole fish, my God, I might run out on Sunday, you know? And they might. We never want to run out or sell out of something. Big difference, terminology. When you run out of something, you screwed up. When you sell out of something, totally different optic. The dish was so popular, we sold out of it. Oh, damn. Or, I'm sorry, we ran out. Well, you screwed up. Big difference. You understand that? It's just how you phrase things. We train our servers to say, oh my, no, I'm sorry, we don't have this thing. We had it earlier, but it was so popular, we sold out of it. Oh, that means they missed an opportunity. You'll have to come back and try it. I will. You know? So, other than the chef forgot to order enough. That sounds like a screw up. Right? Other questions? Yes?
Are any of your restaurants more profitable or better than?
Yes, definitely. So Harbor House is probably our most profitable restaurant. Anybody been there? It's right on the water. It's pretty hard not to hit a home run there. I mean, I got the great location. It's a beautiful restaurant. So that probably makes us the most. But the sales are the highest there. You know, the more sales. So there's a business. I don't know what you call it, but you know, you have fixed costs no matter what business you're in. So what do you guys think the most expensive cost to a restaurant is? This is a trick question. The most expensive cost to any restaurant. Okay, that's a good answer. Good answer, but wrong. The most expensive cost to any restaurant. I'm sorry? Labor? Great answer. Wrong. Most expensive cost to any restaurant. Great answer. Wrong. You're gonna go, oh, what did I tell you?
Land, property, and equipment.
Another really good answer. So the most expensive cost to any restaurant is this, right here. A chair. An empty chair. An empty chair is the most expensive cost to any restaurant. I open my doors every day at 5 o'clock, whether this chair is full or empty. Okay? I have labor there every day. I have air conditioning there every day. I have heat there every day. I have rent payments every day. I have food sitting in my coolers every day, whether this chair is full or not. So this empty chair is a cost because it exists no matter what. So our goal is to fill this empty chair. Another great example is an airplane or a hotel. What's the most expensive cost to a hotel? An empty bed. If you don't sell the room, it sits there empty that night. They make no money on it to recoup or cover any of the costs they had for that day. An airplane. An airplane is going to fly from Milwaukee to Atlanta every day, no matter what. It's going to fly. Whether it has 100 seats or 200 seats, what do you think the airline wants to have in? They want 200 seats because it offsets the labor, the plane, the maintenance, the fuel. They need full airplanes. I need full restaurants. So when I say the most expensive cost to any restaurant is an empty chair. Right? Makes perfect sense, right? So our goal is to fill up as few of these as possible. So we take every reservation that we can. We try to build relationships with people. We have rewards programs to get people to come into our restaurants. You know, we incentivize people. We don't like to discount because discounting is a slippery slope to failure, I think. You train your employee or your guest to buy the lower price point, and that just hurts. That just hurts you because you don't see the higher end revenue side. It's important to incentivize them, reward them for being loyal, and that's okay. And I don't mind doing that. But the best thing to do is, you know, try to train them and educate them as to what they're getting is a superior product, a superior looking restaurant, and a better level of service. Have I covered a lot here? Have I? Yeah. Who wants to go in the restaurant business? But now you may have a different perspective on when you walk into the next restaurant. You know, it's not easy. But you have to love it. Whatever you do, there's nothing more shitty than going to work and you don't want to go to work. You gotta love going to the place that you work at. You really do. Because, you know, I have never worked a day in my life. I believe that. I'm the luckiest guy around. I've never really felt like I've worked. I bounce around and I'm really happy. Now, some of my employees wouldn't feel that way because they have structure. I don't. It's good to be king, you know. But in about an hour, I'm going to be at the ICC, the Italian Community Center, plating up a lunch for 1,000 people. And when I'm in there elbow to elbow with my cooks, they love that. They love that. I'm going to throw on a chef coat and plate up a dinner for a lunch for 1,000 people. They love that. The fact that Joe is going to be in the trenches with us speaks volumes. You know, you shouldn't ask somebody to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. You know, that's important, I think. And I don't do it every day, but when I have an opportunity, I try to be next to the team. You know, that's what leadership, I think, is. Leadership is getting people to buy into your vision and buy into your culture and be willing to follow you. You know, and in some cases, be right next to you. You know, and that's really important. You know, I think if you have a leadership line that's one person with everybody behind, that can be challenging. I'd rather have one person, but then the line sort of doing this, where everybody's moving in the same direction at the same time. I said earlier, you become really a strong organization. And we're not perfect. We screw up. You know, we make mistakes. I think it's important to acknowledge those mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and get better. You know, we are definitely not perfect, and we've had growing pains. We've made some mistakes. We've had some businesses that didn't make it. That's very humbling. We probably will have some businesses in the future that won't make it, but they're all learning experiences. We all learn from those things. So, okay, anything else? Great. Yes, go ahead.
Last question, sorry.
Sure, no.
So when you said like you didn't have the enough funds to grow your other businesses, do you have to ask for a loan in the bank or like you have a provider?
Sure.
that financially
So
support it?
every business has to be funded somehow. I had an investor for my first. This friend of the family gave me $250,000 to open the first restaurant. I paid him back in about 3 years, and it's a great story. He called me into his office one day and he said, "Listen, you paid me back, thank you. The restaurant's too small for either of us to make any money, so why don't you just buy me out? We were partners. Why don't you buy me out?" I'm like, okay. I was so happy. You know, I'm gonna own my own business. I get to buy him out. Went to my attorney. We came up with a price. Now it's tricky because I didn't want to lowball him because I didn't want to insult him for giving me my start, but I also didn't want to pay too much for it, right? So I went to his office. He gave me a legal pad. He said, "Write your number down." So I'm like shaking, you know. I write my number down. So I wrote $60,000. And arguably it was a low number, okay? But I got my advice from my attorney and my accountant. It's a starting point, right? And so I slid it over to him. And he picked up the thing, he looked at it, and he goes, "Wow, this is a low number." He said, "This is not gonna work for me." I'm like, okay. Tell me what you want. And you write it down and slide it back to me. So he writes his number down like this. He slides it back to me. And I look at it and I go, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah, that's what I want." I said, "Okay, we have a deal." The number he wrote was $60,001. I said, why did you want $1 more? He said, because I wanted to win the negotiation. So, and that really got my start. So, you know, it's hard to go to a bank and borrow money for restaurants because they fail at an alarming rate. At this point, I can pretty much get whatever I want because we have a strong track record and a lot of, but today, all these small little places that have opened, it's sort of cool because between friends and family, and they're not highly decorated restaurants, they're pretty much grunge type little places, but that's the soul of a restaurant. You know, these chefs are owners, and these little small little hole-in-the-wall restaurants, these 30, 40, 50-seat restaurants, it's like a blank canvas for them to talk about their trade and to paint their perfect image through food. And so that's what these young restaurants, and they're cobbling together a couple $100,000 with friends and family, maybe getting an economic development loan, maybe getting a little bit of bank money, you know, maybe putting a bunch of money on a credit card and mortgaging the credit cards. They figure out ways to do this, and they take their chance. There's always a risk. But, yeah, restaurants are expensive to build. I mean, a stove, a professional stove today can cost $6,000. You know, a double stack convection oven could be 15 grand. You know, it's almost a car. You know, so the equipment's really expensive. Setting up a restaurant's expensive. But you buy used equipment when you first start. You buy used crap just to get going. You know, you got another one?
Yeah. What would be your advice to, you know, like college students that are like building their careers and have these loans from, you know, the tuition? Would you recommend like just work and save and then build a company, or just go ahead and get a loan and create a company?
Yeah, you know, so it's sort of daunting to be in your position to think, you know, how am I ever going to be able to start a company? How am I ever going to be able to do something like this? You know, there are resources, there are networks that you have to tap into. You know, WIVIC, I think, is a really good one. You guys heard of WIVIC, right? Yeah. It provides financing for women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. I think that's a really important outlet. If you present a very thoughtful business plan, if you have a business that you've spent some time in, that's really important. Lenders look at experience. You know, if you come to somebody with just an idea but no experience in the industry, that's pretty hard to risk a little bit. You know. So I said I made a lot of my mistakes with other. I spent 8 years in New York learning my craft. You know, you're all pretty young. I started my first business at 35. Do not get discouraged. Don't think you're too late. You guys have this clock going inside of your body right now. That's like, oh my God, I gotta get done. No, you don't. You don't. You know, you have to make good decisions, and your life is built one experience at a time. And I've worked for really crappy bosses. I worked for amazing bosses, and I learned a lot from both. I learned how not to treat my employees and how to treat my employees. There's a nugget everywhere. You just got to be a sponge and absorb it all, and learn your craft before you go out and try to do it yourself. It takes time. You have to make the investment. You're here in school to learn, right? And so take the knowledge that you're gathering here in school and try to leverage it into a field you think you might be interested in. The hardest part is finding what you really want to do with your life. You know, I mean, I've got 2 daughters. One's 26, one's 22, and my one daughter moved to Columbus. They went to DSHA high school, and then they went to University of St. Louis, one of them, and the other one went to University of Dayton. I tried to get them to come to Alverno, but they didn't want to. They wanted to get away from mom and dad. So, but you know, the one in Columbus, she is passionate about craft beer. she loves beer. Probably because she drank a lot of it as in high school. But my daughter loves beer. And she has a marketing and a graphics degree. And she wants to turn that leverage that into her passion for craft beer. So she wants to work for a craft brewer someday. And maybe get on the ground floor, maybe start making beer somewhere along the line. So she moved to Columbus because that's where all her friends were, and she took a job at a grocery store working in the beer department, okay? Making $9 an hour, okay? Now, Dad was fortunate to be able to subsidize some of her expenses. But $9 an hour was demoralizing to her, but she was okay with it because she's surrounded by all these labels and all these craft beers. She did it for about 5 or 6 months and learned what she could. And then she went to apply for a beer distributor job. And she started setting up displays in grocery stores, you know, building these huge towers of Coors Light. And she has no interest in Coors Light, but she's learning the process. She's learning the equipment. She's learning the lingo, the terminology. She's learning the distribution channels. She's learning the brands. In a year, she's gotten 3 promotions already. You know, she's just been given her own route. She got a company car, a huge raise, and they see a work ethic in her and a passion that is awesome. But they love the fact that she sort of worked her way up. You know, it doesn't do any good to sit and wish you had that job. You got to roll up your sleeves, get in there, and get dirty, and do some shitty part of the job too. When we hire a server, their first job when they're hired is to work in the dishwasher for 2 full shifts. I want servers to wash dishes for 2 full shifts, so they know that's probably the worst job in the restaurant, yet the most important. And later on, when they're bringing dishes to the dish table, they won't disrespect the dishwasher because they did it and they know how hard it is. So they'll put the plates down nicely. They won't throw the silverware in the water that splashes on the guy. You know, they'll have a respect for that job. Then they spend time bartending, 3 shifts bartending, 2 shifts answering the phones. They spend a full week behind the line cooking the food. Hopefully they burn themselves a little bit. Just to understand what goes into it, you know? I don't want to hurt anybody, but that's part of their job. It's part of the cook's job. You look at some of my cooks, they get burned all over their hands. You learn pretty quickly not to burn yourself. But, yeah, and then and only then do they get to be a server for us. It's a 3-week training program, unheard of in our industry. Most places when you're hired as a server, you get a menu, they tell you to go home and study it. You may trail somebody for 2 shifts, boom, then you're on the floor. They haven't set you up for success in that type of environment. When we hire you, we're going to tell you, you're not going to make any money for 3 weeks, but when you hit the floor, you are going to know everything about our business, our company, and you will be able to sell intelligently. When somebody asks, how does this taste? You know because you've made it. When somebody asks, what's the best thing on the menu? You know, and you can describe in detail what goes into that dish. Information is powerful and it builds confidence. And we have the best sales staff, because that's what servers are. They're salespeople in the city, I think. So yeah, getting funded, that was a long story, long tirade there. But getting funded is not easy, but once you have the background and the experience, people will believe in you and be willing to take a chance at you. But don't go to somebody and say, I want to open a restaurant with no restaurant experience. That's insanity. You'll never get funded. Right? Anything else? Yep.
As far as the Italian Community Center, I was just curious with the taking over of La Scala, what do you envision for that space?
So we took it over November 1st. I think it's a really good opportunity for us as well as them. I don't know how much you know about the ICC. A lot? Is it, your father was a founding member or something, or your grandfather?
Well, maybe both of them are a part of the Italian Community Center.
Right.
So I actually did an internship there too.
Okay. So my father was also one of the founding members. So I go back to the first festas, 1977. So it's very emotional for me to be there. I think that it's a great building with great bones that for a lot of different reasons has not been run really like a business and has been run really well. And we have a fresh set of eyes. We're going to invest in capital, almost $1 million, to renovate it, to make it look really good. But it's got some huge attributes that a lot of other facilities don't. It's got the free parking, it's got big spaces. You know, we can't feed 1,000 people in our company right now anywhere but the ICC. So it's a good thing for us. La Scala, we would like to open an Italian restaurant there, probably rebrand it and redecorate it and redo it. It probably won't happen immediately because the funds aren't available yet. But probably 2018 will start, early 2018. We're going to change the food a little bit and make some tweaks on the food right away. But you know, our primarily focus is the public spaces, remodeling the restrooms, and doing something with the ballroom. And it's a phased-in approach. They're happy because they're no longer running it. You know, we've uncovered a lot of things that I know that we can do better. So, thanks for asking.
Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you
everybody.
again for your vision, your insight, sharing your experience. And actually, I could see some of the things that you have to offer. Some of my marketing students are in this class too, and are working on business plans for a couple local restaurant startups. So I think that there's some great insight that they can translate to that. This is from the students, so thank you.
Wow, how nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you too for how much you support Alverno's mission and vision.
My wife is also available for speaking. She's brilliant. So,
I've always wanted to meet Jennifer.
yeah, Jennifer does a lot of public speaking, and she focuses a lot on women, but a lot on confidence and gravitas, and you know, she's speaking with all the Fortune 500 companies right now, and I know she'd probably come in and...
I teach a women in leadership course also, so I think I'm going to ask her if she wouldn't do that.
Yeah, she charges a lot, but I don't think she charges guys. You know. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
You guys want to take a 10-minute break before we do our team building exercise? So do we need to move tables or anything for the team building exercise, or are we good? Yeah.
I think that area will be fine,
It's fine?
just without the chairs.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
All the things that you.